If you're looking to repair your bingo pinball machine, you certainly have come to the right place. My course consists of 5 hours of high quality and close-up videos covering everything about bingo pinball machines. Now in a minute I'm going to list the 10 most common problems, but first I wanted to show you a few clips from my course. This is the gate switch so that when a ball rolls through, it actually opens these little contacts here, if you'll notice, ever so slightly. You want them adjusted so that when a ball comes in, it just rolls down each one of the contacts just like that, no problem. I'm going to start out here with a wall plug. We got one switch, the switch is open, and the complete circuit over here with the light. And then there's 3 types of switches. There's the middle one, which is normally closed, and when it's activated you see that set of contacts opens, so that's a normally closed switch. We have like the first switch I showed you, which was normally open here at the top, and of course when it activates it causes those 2 contacts to close. And the only other switch that you'll see is the double throw single pole switch, which is this one down here on the end, and it has a single blade in the middle that moves, but 2 separate sets of contacts. Where it actually presses this plunger down and gets those 2 contacts. Now I told you it's quite common those can stick down there. For the most part, you don't usually have to change these adjustments, just like you don't have to change the adjustments on these springs either. Occasionally you'll get one that when it pulls in, there's just not enough spring tension to pull it back. And so you can take this spring off and cut off a couple of loops and rehook it. When you're all done, you sort of want to test it. Use the steppers, make sure that it steps up like it's supposed to. The contacts are centered on the rivets, and the reset solenoids reset back to 0. Basically just what this is a timer mixer to mix up this cam and this cam so they don't turn in the same unison every time. You'll notice that this one turns continuously, but this one turns off and on, stops once in a while, so forth and so on. There was a cam here with a notch in it. This was an index coil that released it when you press the R button, and it would do its search. You press down on the armature so it's locked into the gear that keeps the search relays from moving, and then you want to slide this unit either forward or backwards. As you can see, this unit slides forward and backwards in the slot here. The final adjustment are the contacts for the search index, and as you can see, when this is activated, that one's closed at the top, the bottom one's open, and then when you push down on it, the top one opens and the bottom one is activated. The pulse cams, so they pulse the lights that usually say, press buttons now, and that type of stuff. They run all the time. It's closed here, and it's closed if this is riding on this cam. The only time the points are open are if the whole thing drops back into the car. Now if you notice, this harness here is actually rubbing against this little sharp edge of the switch stack, so much so that you can actually see there's some fraying of the wires, which I discovered on the filming of this thing. And you can also see there's an arc mark here where it's actually been arcing on the sharp corner. Well, the original designed hub was not designed to actually have torsional stress on it. It was meant to turn free all the time. And this is fine as long as the clutches are lubed and everything's nice and slippery and the shaft that goes through here isn't rusty or gummy. There's a 0. Each step of the stepper is marked off by a count. There's the 5. There's the 10. That's the number of times each time that it's stepped. The 0 position, of course, is when everything is reset. As you recall, that was the selector lock trip relay. And if we go back to the book, and there's your selector lock trip relay, and if you remember, that was switch R1. So if you go back to the book, you look up switch R1, it's the bottoms of the switch stack closest to the reset coil. So you go to the game and you locate this switch. Now if you bought an old pinball machine, maybe at a garage sale or a swap meet or even an antique store, and you bought it in not running condition and you took it home and were hoping to get it running, these are the top 10 reasons of why it's not running based on my years of experience. Number one is missing parts. The operators would clip out coils or relays or other components. So you need to really look the game over good to make sure all the parts are there. You're looking for wires that are clipped and don't appear to be connected to anything. So that's the first one, is they've robbed some parts. Number two is not turned on. Now that sounds fairly simple, but if you don't know where the on-off switch is, it could just be turned off. On the early games, it was on the side of the back box. There was a recessed hole and you reached in and turned on a toggle switch. On the later games, it was on the bottom of the cabinet underneath and you had to reach in on a recessed hole and trip it. That was usually on the right-hand side. Number three is misplaced wire connector plugs. Now these are the plugs that connect the base to the head, and there are several different plugs to plug in. If you've got those mixed up or you don't have them centered at the top or the bottom, there's missed gaps, or they're not pushed all the way down, the game's not going to run. Number four, the fuse or the fuse holder. Now old fuses look good, but I've seen them where they don't appear to be blown, but they're not conducting electricity. And then also the fuse holders on these old bingos lose their ability to pinch the fuse for one reason or another. So the fuse is laying in there, but it's not pinched tight enough. Number five, defective coin switch. Maybe not defective, but there's a little fine wire that comes out of the micro switch that the nickel hits as it comes down, and that wire can get bent and keep that switch stuck in the down position, and if they're usually stuck down, they won't reset or work right. Number six is gummy armatures on the motors. Now all the motors from the control unit, the mixer and spotting, ball lifter and shutter, all have these little armatures that are in these bronze bushings, and if they get a little gummy, the armature just doesn't start and then the motor's not going to run. So you need to shoot those bushings with some WD-40. Make sure those armatures are free on all the motors. Number seven, balls not in track. The bingo has to have all 8 balls back in its track or it's not going to cycle or work right. Sometimes they're not all in there. One of them has fallen in the cabinet, or there's some obstruction on the ball return tray and they're not rolling down in place, or somebody has put flipper machine balls in there which are the wrong diameter and those aren't going to work. Number 8, stuck on tilt. If the plumb bob assembly in there is mangled and it's touching, it's going to keep the game tilting. Or the anti-slam switches, which are basically 2 pieces of metal with a weight on it attached several places on the game, and if somebody was to slug the game, the weight would cause the contacts to bounce and tilt the game. Those have a tendency to get mangled. Gummy steppers. Any of the stepper units that don't reset to 0 are going to give you trouble, especially the timer unit. The timer unit, if it's gummy and doesn't go back to 0 when the game resets, is going to throw everything off because the ball count won't be right and your game's not going to run. And number 10 is a broken switch on the start relay. Usually it's a broken switch blade that is busted off, and it's a little hard to find sometimes. You have to look. There'll just be one switch there without a mate. Or on the later games there was a fiber strip that broke. And hey, if that didn't get you up and running, click on the Buy It Now link and you can download the complete course today. Thanks a lot.